today yesterday. Had a pretty good day Friday, but not yesterday and not this morning. Brother Richard spent some time in the emergency room last night with heart, I guess you call it arrhythmia, irregular heartbeat. So keep him in our prayers. And Sister Karen, the Bunn's daughter, is going to take a week off of her treatments. And Brother Allen, who's been with us for a few months now, a couple months, is moving to Florence Tuesday, but that may not be a permanent move. So we hope he can come back with us. Another thing is Neil Gilbert called yesterday afternoon, and they had to take Janet, his wife, back to St. Vincent's, and she's having had to take her to the emergency room. She's having similar problems that she had 3 years ago, almost to the date. And it seems like there's an obstruction of some kind, according to a CAT scan or an MRI. One of the other, Neil mentioned, they had run and they noticed that, so she had to take one of these devices that you swallow a tube, and it pumps stuff out of your stomach. But I know they would appreciate our prayers, and also her doctor who did the surgery should follow up on everything tomorrow. If you get sick, please don't get sick on Friday nights. It's just like, you're, or Saturday night, Richard. Well, how many hours were you in the emergency room? 5? 4 or 5 hours, yeah. They took you in, but they kept you 4 or 5 hours. And so, but thankful for the medical technology that we do have. All right, in our readings this morning, we've come to the end of Jeremiah. The 24th, which was Wednesday, was Jeremiah 42 through 45, and then Thursday through actually yesterday would have been Jeremiah 46 through the end. And I want to call your attention just a few things as we think about this. Jeremiah is living through the last days of what? Jerusalem, Judah, before what? Babylonian captivity. And so he saw the captivity, and he actually describes Jerusalem being sacked. True or false? Yeah, that's true. That's in the last chapter. But I want you to notice in these really 46 through 51, there were prophecies that were made relative to Gentiles. And against them, the problem was Judah had based her hopes on, countering Babylon, and then as Israel had based their hopes on countering Assyria through an alliance or alliances with Egypt and Philistia and Moab and these others. And the truth of the matter is, what kind of people were those people around them? Egypt, Moab, Ammon, and good, bad, what? They were terrible. And Judah was not much better, but it was through Judah that the Messiah would eventually come. And so there was a sparing of Judah. But in 46, you can just look almost at either verses 1 or 2. It's an oracle against whom in verse 2? Egypt. And so while God is going to, in other words, look, I'm going to chastise you, Judah, Jerusalem, but I'm not leaving all these other people out. God is interested in the nations of the earth, while he has particular purposes that he was using Judah and the nation of Israel for. At the same time, he's interested in everybody. We see Elijah and Elisha that Jesus quoted in Luke 4. Elijah goes to the widow at Zarephath, and Elisha to Naaman the leper, and over up in Syria. So God's been interested in everybody, and he rules in the affairs of men. And so in these chapters, he really shows that. In chapter 47, what is what's mentioned? What nation? Philistia, right. Gaza in particular. 48, Moab. Go to 49, children of Ammon. And then in 49:7, Edom. Notice down in 49 verse 23, Damascus, which was the capital of Syria. All right, 28, verse 28, Kedar and Hazor, Arabian cities. Verse 34, all the way over to Elam. 50, Babylon. And 51 continues that. And then in 52, the destruction of Jerusalem. Right. And he describes that in detail. So he ends, and Jerusalem is coming down. Remember, Jeremiah was written over a period of a number of years. And then, so they're coming down, and then Lamentations, all of you know this, but not everybody. There was no prophet by the name of Lamentations, was there? The word Lamentations means, the root word is to lament, to lament. And so to lament, to be sorrowful over, and we'll come to that, Lord willing, Wednesday night. But Lamentations deals with the sorrow that Jeremiah, the people have over what? The loss of Jerusalem. That's exactly right. All right, I want us to go back and start with where we have been in our study. We have the 4 accounts of Jesus' life, and we just want to try to remember the most we can. Matthew's writing from a Jewish perspective, emphasizing the kingdom. Mark from a Roman perspective, emphasizing his miracles. And we're going to see that especially today. I want to emphasize that at least. Luke writes more from a Hellenist, a Gentile perspective, with the emphasis of Jesus' humanity. And then John from a Greek perspective, emphasizing his deity. All right, and so where we are on all of this is in the great Galilean ministry. Years of preparation included about how many years in Jesus' life? About 30, that's right. And then the beginning ministry begins, always remember, what event? His baptism, when God announces, declares, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. All right, so after the beginning ministry, we have the baptism, the temptation, and then John 1, 2, 3, and the first part of John 4. And so you just keep in mind, John 2, the turning of the water to wine in Cana, the cleansing of the temple. John 3, interview with Nicodemus. John 4, interview with the woman at the well. And then he's going up to Galilee. Then at the end of John 4, he comes to Cana, where he heals the nobleman's son who was in Capernaum. All right, he moves from Cana. He moves from Cana down to Nazareth, and what happens there? He's rejected. He basically says, I am the Messiah, from Isaiah 61. And they don't like that, and they challenge him. And then he shows that his conduct is very similar to Elijah and Elisha. And so they want to throw him off the brow of the hill. Well, he leaves Nazareth and he comes to Capernaum and makes that his home city. And by his working in that area, Zebulun and Naphtali, it actually fulfilled prophecy of Isaiah 9, 1 and 2. All right, so then he, as he's in Capernaum, he's right here on the seacoast. And so some of these disciples of John have been following Jesus, and among them are Peter, Andrew, James, and John. And so we studied last Sunday, about Luke 5 and the parallels in Matthew 4 and Mark 1. And in those, it's not like, hey, just come on, guys, I'm going to make you fishers of men. You know, that by itself doesn't really match, except if you look at Luke 5, which is the miracle of the what? The catch of fish, yes. And then you put that together, no wonder he would say, come follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. And they left all and followed him. And then following that, Jesus teaches in the synagogue in Capernaum. Again, he's making Capernaum right up here on the northwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee, making that his home quarters, his headquarters, so to speak. And he teaches in the synagogue. We talked about this Wednesday night, and he heals a demoniac. When you say the word demoniac, don't think that's close, that's akin to a Pontiac. A demoniac is just an adjective form of one who is what? Demon possessed, right. And so we want to just real briefly remember that here is a synagogue likely built, I mean, it's pretty evident it was built on the same site, though it's not the same. It's just like, here the building here at Pleasant Grove was built in first service was March of 1958, and built in 57, the early part of 58. Well, let's say 100 years from now, a group has it. Most of us are dead, I suppose, and they end up, maybe there's some rockets coming over and some of it's bombarded and whatever, and they build up, but they use some of the stones that are still here. Maybe maybe the sidewalk's still there, or the foundation is still there, and so they just build up. Well, that's basically what you have here with the synagogue. The synagogue built upon the remains of the synagogue of Jesus. And so here are massive stones that were used to construct this synagogue that Jesus did a lot of teaching in. So he teaches in the synagogue, heals a demoniac, and the amazement over what he's able to do. In fact, he says just in a word, the demon exited this person, and power over spiritual matters. And this is where we are today. There are a number of healings. I'll make this point a little in just a moment, but I want to call your attention to something that we'll see in this very passage. Mark began, let's go to Mark first. Mark, the first chapter. I want you to notice just the nature of Mark's account. Chapter 1, verse 1, the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, even as it is written in Isaiah, behold, I send my messenger before thy face, who shall prepare thy way. About whom does Mark speak? John the Baptist. And so all of a sudden, after verse 1, he's speaking of John the Baptist. And then verse 4 is John's early ministry. He baptized in the wilderness and preached the gospel about the baptism of repentance and the remission of sins. In verse 9, we have what? Jesus' baptism. 12 and 13, his temptation. And then in 14 and 15, John's preaching and Jesus. But then in 16 through 20, we have what happened? The occasion of the catch of fish, a miracle. 21 down through 28, he teaches in the synagogue, which is where we are, where we were. He cast out the demoniac. So we got a miracle. Look at verse 22. They were astonished at his teaching, for he taught his authority. And then he proved his authority by verse 23, just one example. 23 and 24, casting out what? The unclean spirit. That's right. All right, 29 through 34, he heals whom? Peter's wife's mother. And then in 32 through 34, it continues with people who have all kinds of sicknesses. They bring them to Jesus there in Capernaum. Then 35 through 39, he goes out and prays for a short time. But then when Peter comes in 36 and says, hey, everybody's after you. They're seeking you, into verse 37. And so he says, we'll go into the next town. So they do. And then when they go into a town, somewhere evidently close by Capernaum, who does he heal in 40 through the end of the chapter? A leper. Now, if you just glance in chapter 2, he heals a paralytic in 1 through 12. And then eventually he comes back and he calls Levi or Matthew, and we have other miracles. the point I wanted to make through all this is that we notice a couple of things at least. One is that Mark is emphasizing what? The what of Jesus. The works, the miracles of Jesus, to substantiate the fact that he's God's son. Another idea is there's a quickness, there's a quick, let's go on and on and on. And there's not the, like in John, here will be a miracle, and then there's a lengthy speech that will, or dialogue between either a person like in Nicodemus, the woman at the well, or with Jews, John 5, Pharisees, John 6, after the feeding of the 5,000 multitudes. So there's just a different emphasis. And I think, guys, the problem that we find in today's world is there aren't enough people who've even read anything in the New Testament to even argue from a skeptic's point of view. But skeptics will usually argue, well, why are they all so different? And this does not include that. Well, what would be the use of having 4 books that said all the same thing? Might as well have one. But the point of the 4 is there's a different emphasis, there's a different audience, and when you combine it all together, you have a fuller picture that Jesus is the Christ of Old Testament expectation. He is the Messiah from the point of view of the miracles substantiating his claims. Luke's account, however, he came through Mary. Mary was his mother. Just as much as we are human, he was human. And yet in John, he was here before what existed? John 1:1 and 2. Before the world was. And so you've got all of that together that gives us the bigger picture. So I just wanted to bring to your mind that. Now, when we come to Matthew's account, you'll notice up here, Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law and others. This is still fairly early, a few months into the Galilean ministry. But Matthew records it even after the Sermon on the Mount. Let's go back. I'm just kind of get ahead of myself here. But Matthew, I want you to notice, go back to Matthew. We've noticed the idea of the kingdom. Look at chapter, he's shown in the genealogy he has a right to be king. Then in chapter 2, verse 2, the wise men say, where is he that is born what? King of the Jews. As I've told you before, I used to teach just Matthew to some high school students, and I would get them to know the chapter contents. And the first chapter would be genealogy and announcement of the king. Chapter 2 would be honor and jealousy toward the king. Chapter 3 would be announcement of the kingdom and baptism of the king. Chapter 4, temptation and early work of the king. 5, 6, and 7, constitution of the kingdom. And so what we have then is that emphasis of the kingdom. Then in 5, all of you know, 5, 6, and 7, so what? Sermon on the Mount, emphasizing the kingdom. But I want you to notice in verse 28 of chapter 7, when Jesus finished these words, they were astonished at his teaching because of why? He taught as one who had authority, not as the scribes. And we've seen that already in Mark. But I want you to notice, though, in chapters 8 and 9, I used to tell the kids, I said, just think miracles. Constitution of the kingdom, 8 and 9, miracles of the king. And so what we have are about 10 different miracles. The nature of these is different in each. 10 different miracles to substantiate the fact that he had the authority by which he spoke. And so you can almost see that Matthew is, okay, here's the sermon, and they're just flabbergasted. How in the world can he say? We're amazed he's speaking with such authority. And then Matthew records, well, he had authority to speak as he did, and here's the proof. Chapters 8 and 9, all these different miracles. However, they're taken a little bit out of order chronologically. So we go back to Mark's account, and we'll notice even in Luke's account, but in Mark's account in particular, what happened here, whereas it's recorded in Matthew 8 about the healing of Peter's mother-in-law, it's recorded in Mark before even he calls the disciples as apostles. Luke 6 indicates that he called the apostle. He called the 12 and basically said, you're going to be my apostles. And then he gives a Sermon on the Mount following. Well, Matthew 8, the Sermon on the Mount, and then he has Peter's mother. So we just find that things are a little bit out of order. And but anyway, all of that's happening, and the crowds are gaining around him. His popularity is increasing. And by the time we get to Mark, the 2nd chapter, with the healing of the paralytic, we're going to find some what? It's not everybody's happy-go-lucky. What'd you say? Opposition, yes. They said this, the Pharisees especially. And so we have the growing hostility. As the popularity is increasing, everything's been kind of positive so far. But then by Mark 2, the hostility begins. And we'll see that developing. Mention that in the first part. Okay, let's answer some of our questions. Let's read. Let's read first the passages that are mentioned here. Mark 1, 29 through 34. Randy, why don't we start with you, if you don't mind. Mark 1, 29 through 34. Okay, thank you, Randy. Now, insofar as chronology is concerned, what day of the week has it been? We go back to verse 21. That's right. He was in the synagogue on the Sabbath. So you notice the little time markers here. So he heals this demoniac in 21 through 28, and then look at 29. And immediately or straightway, when they were come out of the synagogue, is right after that event, they come to whose house? Simon, Peter, and Andrew. And who's living there with them? The mother-in-law, Peter's wife's mother. And what was her problem? She's sick with a fever. It's interesting that Matthew and Mark say she was sick with a fever. Luke, being the physician, says it was a great fever. And doing just a little reading on that is interesting, that the ancients looked at fevers very similar to how we do in a kind of a layman's term. We say somebody had a low grade of fever, you know, and then man, I was just burning up. I was at 103 or 4. I've had both. I know you have too, and so the ancients separated. In Luke's account, she had a great fever, which meant what was likely her posture? Lying down. Yeah, lying down. Well, it's implied because Jesus reached out his hand and did what? Lifted her up. So she's lying down. She's sick with this. Can't you just imagine? She's perhaps maybe chilled. You know, when you get the higher your fever, you just feel so terrible and achy and chilled, and you can't get enough cover. That's the way I am. Or y'all are not that way, are you? Everybody's the same way, I assume. And so he raised her up. Fever left her. And what did she do immediately? She started waiting on her. There was no recovery time. There was no, let's take some aspirin, ibuprofen, and 3 or 4 days, I think you'll be strong enough to get back to work. No, it was immediately. And then look at 32. At even or evening, when the sun set. Evening of what day? The same day, the Sabbath, evidently the same day. Then word gets out, and all who were sick and those who were possessed with demons, to the degree that the city is the inhabitants of the city are just crowded around the door. If you can imagine how it is at polling places sometimes, 5 o'clock in the afternoons, and you got the people just crowded in to one place. And he healed many that were sick with the American Standard. I believe the King James says divers diseases. The word divers is used in the older translation. It just means what? Various. Yeah, Josh? Yeah. Well, some things were not. Some things around the home would be okay. It was more going out and with the, harvesting crops and that. But Jesus will show it would be possible for a person to rescue an ox out of the ditch, and do some other things that were not a violation of the Sabbath. And I'm not certain that would have been, but they're bringing these people to him for healing, and he does heal them. All right, let's go backwards to Matthew's account. Matthew 8. You already got it? Yes, sir. That's right. Exactly. A day began after sunset. So actually, Saturday night, it would have actually been what we call the first day of the week, or Sunday, looking at the Jewish time. All right, 14 through 17 here, Brother Gene, if you would. 8:14 through 17 of Matthew. Yeah, Matthew 8:14 through 17. Matthew 8:14 through 17.
Jesus came into Peter's home. He saw his mother-in-law lying sick in bed with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her. She got up and waited on him. The evening came, they brought to him many who were demon possessed. He cast out the spirit with the word, healed all who were ill. This was to fulfill what was spoken through Isaiah the prophet. He himself took our infirmities and carried away our diseases.
All right, and we talked a little bit about that, skipping ahead from on Wednesday night. Let's go to one other quick thing there in verse 16. He cast out the spirits with a word. He would just say a word, which is reminiscent of Genesis 1. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Psalm 109, I believe, talks about that idea that he just spoke and the worlds were. By the breath of his mouth, things came in. Just speaking, the authority that is in his word. I think that's something we need to appreciate, that Jesus could just say a word and all kinds of things would move. I can say a lot of words and nothing moves. But here, a word, the power that he, and not that he even had to say anything, but the fact that he did say indicated to those around him that the power was coming from him, from himself. That's right. Yes, sir, Landon.
It also says that it's going to work.
Yeah, this is a,
There's all this, he's working on the Sabbath.
yeah. This not work for the Lord. Yeah. All I got to do is speak, and it does. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Reminds me of an idea that now while you were telling me, now it's gone. Oh, wasn't worth it, I guess. Okay, good point. Very good point. All right, let's go to Luke's account. Luke, the 4th chapter, and we'll come down to the passage that this deals with, Luke 4:38 through 41. Sister Janet?
Now he, but he said
All right, thank you. All right, let's just a couple of things here. I've already alluded to this point here on the chart. Mark records this event early, while Matthew records it later. Remember, Matthew follows more of a topical emphasis. 10 miracles follow the Sermon on the Mount, and it actually, the miracles in chapters 8 and 9 are proof of why the people were so astounded at his words, because he spoke with authority. And we also notice, as we go through the life of Jesus, the variety of the miracles, the variety of the healings. He has power, shows power over every area of sickness. When he calls divers diseases or various diseases, every area, we'll see somebody who's paralyzed in chapter 2 of Mark. We see a great fever. Well, perhaps that was from an infection. Well, Jesus will, without any sutures, he will take Malchus' ear during, when Jesus is arrested and just reattach it. No sutures necessary. So every area of sickness, of disease, demon possession, his ability to defy law of gravity or buoyancy, he's over that by walking on the water. The resurrection of the widow of Nain's son in Luke 7, the resurrection of Lazarus in John 11. All that shows his power over what? Over death. Over death. And so all of these show Jesus' complete power over every area of our experience. His life's work proves he is all sufficient for our every need. In Colossians 3, it says, speaking of Christ, he is our all in all. All in all. Every area of life, he is sufficient for everything we need. Okay, now this is, I went ahead and scanned, and actually took a picture with my camera, my phone, and then emailed it to myself. Here's a comparison. Straightway, he rose from the synagogue. Luke's account just says he went in the house of Simon, not going into detail. Matthew's account says Mark's account says it was Simon and Andrew's house. Right. Now, he's somewhere around Capernaum. In John, the first chapter, it states that when Jesus was minded to go into Galilee, that he found Philip, who was of Bethsaida, the home of Peter and Andrew also. So it looks like that Bethsaida, but in a sense, Bethsaida, as Brother McGarvey makes a point, Bethsaida is like a suburb of Capernaum. That's like Dolomite is a suburb of Pleasant Grove. You got that little village, Bethsaida, right over from the, but anyway, whatever it was, if it says Capernaum and it, former home, whatever, that's where they are. And then he had a fever in Mark's account, a fever, and a great fever or high fever in Luke's account. And he took her by the hand according to Mark. He touched her hand in Matthew, and he rebuked the fever and left her. Immediately she rose up and ministered. Does not say anything except he stood over her and rebuked the fever. In the evening, they brought those that were sick, possessed of demons, and he healed all who were sick. He laid his hands on them. So you get the idea of putting all three accounts, the complete picture of what's going on. Comment or question? Anybody? All right, let's answer our questions. We'll have time to move on, I believe. Down at the bottom of the page, F, on page 39, Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law. How might we know that this event happened on the same day of the above? Because what? He went out of the synagogue. It was a Sabbath day, and he immediately goes into Peter and Andrew's house. Number 2, from Luke's account, the house into which Jesus and other disciples went belonged to Simon Peter. Immediately they told Jesus what? What was that? Simon's mother-in-law was sick with a great fever. What did she do immediately? Oh, by the way, what did Jesus do? You'll notice I've got a wrong passage there. Luke 4 is right, but that should be what? Matthew 8, verse 15. Good, Patty. Matthew 8:15 is the correct verse. I've corrected that. What did he do? He took her by the hand. According to Luke, he rebuked the fever, and then he just did what? He raised her up. Now, obviously, she could have gotten up on her own. The fact that he rebuked her and he took her would show the people that her miracle was through himself. What did she do immediately, which showed that her healing had been instantaneous, that there was no time needed to regain her strength, so to speak, as there is with us? She immediately what? Served them. That's right. She went about serving as if nothing had ever happened. Word of this miracle must have gotten out. By evening, note how many came to Jesus and what happened. How many came to Jesus? The whole city was there. And they brought all who were sick, possessed with demons. Yes. And I mentioned in the note here, as crowds gathered around Jesus early in the ministry, many were interested in him for different reasons. Some desired to be healed. Some had friends they wanted healed. Next page. Others were interested in seeing the miracle itself. We'll see that as the ministry unfolds. That a lot of people were interested in Jesus for different reasons. That's not the case now. No, everybody's interested in Jesus for the same reason. True? No, same way. Same way now. People are interested. Some come to these healing campaigns that these so-called faith healers have in order to get a miracle. So I'm convinced that some people are involved in religious circles, perhaps even in leadership positions, just as a job. And they don't stand for anything. I was reading about some, on AL.com the other day, about some woman who's had some position in the Methodist Church, and we shows you something right there. And then she was talking about the inclusivity of the gays and lesbians and all that. I think you either don't believe a thing in the world about what the Bible says, or you understand it. You're trying to hide it. Well, you can't do that and be true to what is obvious immorality in the Scripture. And yet there are those in high place religiously who do that. And so, it's obvious that people are interested in Jesus for different reasons. And as we see the narrative begin to unroll, we'll see those various sides of people and their interest. And the main reason, it's mentioned here. He came certainly to die for our sins, but primarily what he wanted them to know was what he was preaching, his teaching. And the miracles were simply the works to substantiate that what he said was true. And we'll see as time passes that there were a lot of occasions that he would not accommodate their desire for miracles. He's simply going to teach them, and the other miracles that he performed were sufficient to instill faith in these people. But that was not the point of his coming. The point of his coming was to preach and teach and to reveal who God is. Remember John 1:18? No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten of the Father, full of who's in the bosom of the Father, he hath declared him. He's revealed him. That was the purpose of Jesus coming, along, of course, with his sacrificial death. Keep reading with me there at the top of 40. However, all of Jesus' miracles were designed to produce faith in the hearts of those who saw and heard. As the crowds gathered, Jesus taught them. Therefore, when people came for whatever reasons, they heard him preach. And they would become either believers or unbelievers. There was no middle ground. This early in Jesus' ministry, the unbelievers are still quiet. As the story continues, Jesus will do many miracles on other Sabbath days, and his enemies will begin to oppose him on the ground that he violated Sabbath law. However, at present, the strongest reaction to him is amazement that he's capable of such teaching and miracles. And again, we go back to the words and the works. All right? Comment or question on any of that? We just see that he's we looked at this a little bit Wednesday night, that in Isaiah 53, that he quotes in Matthew, himself bore our diseases and bore our afflictions and carried our diseases. And McGarvey made the point, it's progressive, a man of sorrows, sorrowful because he bore sickness and sorrows of others. We'll come across this idea that Jesus had compassion on them. And based on his compassion, he would do certain things, certainly. And also, here's something else that I wanted to make a point on. In this passage we just read, Jesus rebuked the demons, or demon in this man, one of them that he cast out. This demon says, we know who you are. You're the Son of the Most High. You're the Holy One of Israel. You're the Son of God. Rebuking them, Jesus rebuked them. He suffered or permitted them, the demons, not to speak because they knew him. And McGarvey made this point that I thought was good. Those who are disposed to frequent spiritual seances and to seek information from mediums should remember that the Son of God permitted his disciples to receive no information from such sources. He forbade demons to speak in the presence of his own, even on the most important of all topics, which they admitted he was the Son of God. They admitted that. But Jesus did not want any influence whatsoever from these demons. And I made the note down here, this prohibition of demons speaking will continue through their work, the apostles' work, recorded in Acts. You remember when Paul and Silas were in Philippi, and a young maid had a spirit of divination, and she went about crying out, "These are servants of the Most High God, who speak the way of salvation." And what Paul do on that occasion? He cast them out, cast the evil spirit out. And when the masters of the young lady saw that the hope of their gain was gone, they took Paul and Silas and did what to them? Put them in prison. Yes. And so then we have the conversion of the jailer. All right. So Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law and others over here, and then he tours Galilee, preaching and healing. I've got a wider circle because Decapolis is mentioned and Syria is mentioned. In fact, we'll see in Matthew's account, people from Syria, Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, beyond the Jordan, which was Perea, all these people are flocking to be with Jesus as he's preaching all the way around this Galilean area. So he heals this leper and creates a lot of excitement in Matthew 4. I can't believe it's 10:15. It's just, we'll have to stop, I suppose. But I just love to talk about all this, guys. I don't know, I never tire of it. Because here is what we're talking about is really the apex of the Bible story. From Genesis 3:15 and the crushing of the head of the serpent, through all of that, we come to Jesus, the ladder that Jacob saw in Genesis 28 from earth to heaven. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the lawgiver until Shiloh come. Here's Shiloh. Here's peace. And we've come to this, and it's just, it's so rich. And it helps us to have, I appreciated David's prayer the other day about the faith in the Lord, to see him in all of his radiant glory. And that's what we're trying to do. As feeble as our minds are, and as finite as they are, the Word is reflective of God's infinite wisdom. And actually, if you're like I am, the more you read and study, the more you see you don't know. The more you read and study, the more you see there is to know. And it's like a wealth of information, a wealth, a mine that you might go down and the seams are endless. And that's what we see in this. Okay, we'll have to stop. Thank you for your help.